Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'd like to welcome you to the Manila Times online forum on the PH outlook for housing, or what we call fostering the urban development in the country. I'd like to introduce the president and CEO of the Manila Times for his welcome remarks, Mr. Dante Clink Ang II, to give his opening remarks.
Honorable Marilyn Pintor, DHSUD Undersecretary and HSAC Commissioner, Mr. Noel Toti Carino, Caraba President, Attorney Harrison Paltongan, Suntrust Properties President, Mr. Emmanuel Herbosa, DBP President and CEO, Mr. Januario Jesus Atencio, Januarios Holdings and Chairman and CEO, Architect KD Velasco, V Group of Companies CEO, Mr. Paulo Olivares, Organization of Socialized and Economic Housing Developer of the Philippines, Vice President. Good morning and welcome to the Manila Times Business Forum. Housing is a key topic close to the hearts of people around the world. For Filipinos, it is our common aspiration to own one. Since the outbreak of COVID-19, though, that dream has taken on a new mental picture, at least for some. Our collective gaze shifted from the roofs over our heads to the four walls that have some people feeling separated not only from loved ones, but also from much of society. The home has changed from the place where we retire at the end of the day to a multifunctional site that is also for work, school for our children, as well as an escape from the health threat that still lingers. Still, those who have that are the lucky ones. There are many less fortunate who have only the streets, even as there are many others feeling squeezed by the recession that have them looking at that very possibility. The economic fallout from the pandemic will likely erode the gains to reduce homelessness and other signs of extreme and relative poverty made over the last 2 decades. And the economic crisis is also likely to exacerbate the social issues related to adequate, affordable, and sustainable housing. Forgive me for opening with a somber tone. It is merely a suggestion that this morning's event tackles a meaty, if not complex, issue that is worthy of national attention. We at the Times look forward to a productive and meaningful discussion and presentations from the housing experts whom we have invited here today.
I'd like to call on our keynote speaker. Let me introduce Attorney Marilyn Pintor. Good morning, Attorney Pintor. I will turn it over to you.
Despite the uncertainties that hung in the air as economies worldwide, including our very own country, try to grapple with and reel from the impact of COVID-19 pandemic, we in the housing sector choose to remain optimistic amid this unprecedented crisis. While the commercial, to mention the malls and the hospitality sectors, such as the hotels and our resorts in the country, definitely took a massive direct hit when this health crisis erupted, we believe that real estate will remain resilient. It should also be noted that prior to the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic, real estate is regarded relatively as a strategic asset class, as it can offer stable returns, passive income, diversification, and leverage. Many property consultancy firms and stakeholders have already announced revised forecasts and estimates, with expectations of tempered real estate activities, which means slower production and demand as expected during a crisis. However, we believe this is only temporary. For one, housing is a right. The right to adequate housing, which is a component of everyone's right to adequate standard of living as recognized by international human rights law. However, there is a huge unmet housing need of 6.57 million housing units by 2022. That's an estimate. This is the primary task of the Department of Human Settlements and Urban Development, which is to bridge that gap that is projected to balloon to 22 million units by the year 2040 if we do not act swiftly to address this need. Second, despite the pandemic, the priority infrastructure of the government under the Build program will continue, and it will definitely boost housing production and real estate investments in the areas covered by these projects. Among these projects are the ongoing north to south commuter railway of the Department of Transportation, which will traverse Manila to Clark, Pampanga in the north, and Manila to Calamba, Laguna, and Sorsogon in Bicol. The project alone will require the relocation of some 100,000 informal settler families. This number does not yet include residential and commercial establishments in the formal sector affected by the project's right of way that will require replacement units. There are a total of 104 priority infrastructure projects to be implemented or to be commenced implementation by year 2022. These projects will present investment opportunities in housing and real estate development, especially for investors with liquidity. The construction of housing and real estate development projects that will support these infrastructure projects will redound to the economy, given that housing is labor intensive and directly stimulates about 80 allied industries. The urgency to address the growing need of adequate housing and well-planned communities has never been a matter of survival until the country confronted the COVID-19 pandemic. We have seen various highly dense communities, the rapid increase of the spread of the virus, given the difficulty to observe safe social distancing in congested cramped spaces, and inadequate access to household water and sanitation. Now, this pandemic highlighted the need to enhance the quality of living conditions among vulnerable households, especially those in highly dense communities. It likewise emphasized the need to improve affordability on the back of the increased unemployment and loss of livelihood, as well as rising production costs brought about by strict health protocols and housing redesign that considers public health goals as built-in mitigation measures. Now, the housing agencies recognize shelter as a right of every Filipino family as a component of the right to adequate standard of living. It is the obligation of the state or the DSUD in particular, the Department of Human Settlements and Urban Development, to respect, protect, and fulfill this particular right of the informal sector families, the low-income group, and to develop resilient and sustainable communities envisioned in our flagship program called Balay, or the Balay, which means building adequate, livable, affordable, and inclusive Filipino program. We had started laying the solid foundations for the future of the housing sector in our country by institutionalizing medium and long-term plans to remain proactive. Against this backdrop, the housing and urban development sector continues to pursue building safe, resilient, and sustainable communities towards realizing a safe and healthy Philippines. we shall strengthen the implementation of Balay program through the partnerships and collaborations with our stakeholders. And we have stakeholders such as other government agencies and also stakeholders representing the private sector. Lastly, allow me to say that we value in the SUD, we value this kind of engagement organized by the Manila Times, not only to inform the general public of what the SUD is doing, where we are right now, or how do we intend to deliver our mandates. But more importantly, we are here to listen and learn from stakeholders from the private sector. Thank you very much for having us today. Mabuhay tayong lahat.
To react on this, keynote of Attorney Pintor, we have the National President of the Chamber of Real Estate and Builders Association Incorporated, represented by Mr. Noel Toti Carino, to share his insights on this. Mr. Carino, over to you.
We all realize that the national housing backlog is 6.57 million units, with over 1.5 million belonging to the informal settler households, again, living in danger areas, is simply just too huge to be ignored. Even as we go to the office every day, we always see this, even in the urban areas. Overcoming this condition will require, really, as I said earlier, very innovative government approach, coupled with creative strategies by the private sector, especially in the light of the pandemic, working hand in hand together. NEDA's ambition, the NEDA had a program called NEDA's Ambition Natin 2040, found that Filipinos want to enjoy really a strongly rooted, comfortable, and secure life, where the family lives together in a place of their own, in comfortable homes with the desired amenities and secure tenure. Likewise, the Philippine Development Plan, on the other hand, also elaborates on strategies towards expanding people's access to affordable, adequate, safe, and secure shelter in well-planned communities. This and other innumerable challenges in delivering the needed housing stock to various sectors of society has been the inspiration behind CREBA's five-point housing agenda, which was initiated way back in 2012. So this has been our five-point housing agenda program, which was initiated by our chairman, Charlie Gorayabden, which we have been religiously and patiently campaigning. We have been stuck in, year out, really campaigning for this five-point agenda. What is this five-point housing agenda that CREBA has religiously been and determinedly been campaigning? This is actually a package of interrelated legislative and policy reform proposals to make home acquisition more affordable and responsive to the majority of the Filipinos. Two of these proposals have already been enacted into law. Since 2012, the amendment of the Balanced Housing Program and the creation, finally, of the Department of Human Settlements and Urban Development, which CREBA pushed actively for almost 27 years until its passage last 2017. With the onslaught today of this COVID pandemic, the need for decent, livable communities and affordable housing has even become more urgent and pronounced, as we can all see now. But with the Housing and Urban Development Department in place, and hopefully with the department's Secretary Del Rosario's leadership at its helm, we may have a good chance not only to respond to the challenges of the housing problem, but also, especially now, to maximize intensified housing production as a source of jobs, fiscal revenues, and a value chain of economic activities towards a recovery. CREBA would like to reiterate on some of our earlier proposals to foster urban development amid this pandemic. Institution of the National Land Use Plan for the entire country. This particular bill has been sitting in Congress for several Congresses already. So maybe we're hoping that the Congress today will really make sure that this happens. Number 3, averting the impending imposition of the VAT, the VAT to housing purchases up to 3.2 million per unit, a privilege that home buyers will cease to enjoy by January of 2021 in accordance with the Train Law to prevent sudden housing price surge beyond the affordability of yet homeless Filipinos. We worked on this one in the past, but today with the pandemic here, I think it's very timely that the DSUD should really try to secure that the extension of the VAT privilege for housing starts below 3.2 million be extended for another 2 years. The housing chairman, Senator Tolentino, assured us that this will be taken up, but we are concerned that it is already September and the deadline is already January. So marami hong maapektuhan dyan. Okay, number 4, freezing of real property taxes at current levels for a period of at least 2 years and the non-imposition of additional property-related taxes at both national and LGU levels. You know, taxes paid by developers also form part of production costs that are ultimately passed on to home buyers. No, so maybe if we can work on this and we can have proper disposition and appreciation of how we can work together so that housing can become truly affordable, this would be much better, especially now. Number 5, passage of the Valuation Reform Bill to introduce reforms in the real property valuation and assessment to do away with multiple overlapping and outdated valuations. And number 6, finally, we have likewise appealed to the DSUD the last 3 months for the temporary suspension on the requirements of the balanced housing for providing socialized housing as a requirement for major projects and the issuance of a provisional license to sell valid for 2 years to fast-track the processing and ease the bottlenecks in the release of housing-related permits. I think we have 3 months ago, we in a forum also with the Secretary, we urged him that during this pandemic, there are a lot of projects that have been in the back burner or could not get into the market because of this requirement. So we're not asking that you suspend the production of socialized housing. What we are requesting at this time is that a provisional license to sell be granted to help bring these projects, the main projects, in the market without imposing right now the mandatory, obligatory requirement that socialized housing be part of it. Di naman ho namin tinatanggal, kundi sinasabi lang ho namin, wag ho muna ngayon dahil we need to conserve all the resources so that these major projects can enter into the market. Then we will address the socialized housing requirement. This appeal is again made to the Secretary to ease submission of complete requirements like CAR and verified survey reports, of which I'm sure you know that it's not in the control of the SUD nor the developers as to timetables. No? Extraordinary times call for extraordinary measures. We hope that the above proposals be considered as government sets its long-term and forward-looking vision for the future of our country. We stand solidly behind our country's leaders as they plan the direction and future of our economy and our people amid these very challenging times to endeavor and to heal as one. So thank you very much for the opportunity to expound on CREBA's position in the housing situation. Marami pong salamat.
Up next, again, another reactor we have is the president of Suntrust Properties Incorporated. I'd like to introduce Attorney Harrison Paltongan. Good morning, Attorney Paltongan.
Our vision in Suntrust is not actually about in-city dwelling, but rather about regional development. Regional development in the sense that we also want to share in the decongestion of NCR, which is now occupied by about 13 million Filipinos. That is why we have projects in Mindanao, we have Davao Park District, we have projects in Negros, we have projects in Cavite, Laguna, wherever. And most of these projects, we are doing this with our parent company. We call this township project, which is patterned after what our chairman, Dr. Andrew Tan, showed us in Eastwood City. They call it live, work, play, learn, because you have schools, relax because you have a nice entertainment or green environments. And we are trying to pattern this outside the NCR. That's why it is very opportune. Last May 6, 2020, the president passed this BP squared, which is Balik Probinsya Bagong Pag-asa, which encourages people from the NCR to transfer back to their provinces. Of course, before COVID, we were confronted by the problem about traffic. But during the pandemic, it seems more urgent that we implement the concept of this program, which the president said is a national program. And this should be supported. It isn't enough that we give incentives to the applicants who are willing to go back to the provinces, but we must have to ensure that they don't come back to Metro Manila when these incentives are gone. So we must have to create these township projects that will give them work. That is why the concept of this township project, whether we call it eco zones or new urban areas, the concept of this is that they are so master planned, they are mixed use, and they contain the everyday what is necessary for a decent human being to have every day. So we're talking about his residence, we're talking about the work, we are talking about the hospitals, commercial establishments, education, which are all within walking distance, biking distance. So by having these kinds of development that would require, of course, bigger areas of land, we hope that this would be incentivized. In fact, that is provided already in the executive order of the president, that there shall be incentives for this. And I hope we could do this ASAP so that developers would now be planning about where to put their township projects. Of course, for smaller developers, they can do combinations, pooling of resources so that they can acquire so much land that will address all of the needs that you should put in a township project. That is why the BOI, which has yet to produce its IPP or Investment Priorities Program, should include this as a project that should be supported and therefore entitled to fiscal and non-fiscal incentives. Now, that is our vision, and that is what we intend to do. Suntrust and its parent company to do all of these township projects outside the NCR. But what I would wish to emphasize as the worst problem of the developers now is about collection during the pandemic. We understand that lots of buyers may not be capable of making payments because they lost their jobs, they lost their business. But there are so many buyers, we are sure, who are still willing to sustain their payments. Unfortunately, every time there is a government regulations that says there is a moratorium, you need not pay for 60 days. Of course, they take advantage of that because that is provided by law. Unfortunately, as mentioned by the commissioner, undersecretary a while ago, we have allowed construction to go on. In fact, for Suntrust, we have about 5,000 construction workers or in our various projects. And if we do not collect from buyers, this Bayanihan 2, I assume is going to be passed. And there is a provision there that says that there is a moratorium again for buyers not to pay for 60 days. So that's the problem, because we are supposed to give the salaries of all of these construction workers. And of course, our employees, our salespeople who are there doing their best to sell, doing online. So there is a mismatch if we do things like this. Okay? That is a concern. Now, going back to the matter about the housing backlog, which was estimated by my friend Toti and the commissioner to be at 6.57 million. Well, most of these are in the lower bracket, which is the economic housing and the low-cost housing. As I've said, or I have a slide here to emphasize matters already raised by Toti. I want to say that it is not just the supply, because there is no problem, I think, about the supply when developers are encouraged and incentivized to produce. Everyone wants to do business. The problem is the corresponding demand, it's the affordability. In fact, right now we would say, do we really need socialized housing projects? If you go around, you'll find lots of unoccupied socialized housing. And for so many, several reasons, we need to find a way to encourage occupancy. I would say that the housing backlog is not just about lacking of supply, but about affordability. I was discussing about, value-added tax. That was touched by Toti a while ago about socialized housing compliance. Toti was saying we should suspend or defer it. We have actually oversupply of socialized houses. That's why we have heard about Kadamay taking over units in Pandi because they were not occupied. All around the country, there are oversupply also of socialized housing units built mostly by NHA. So right now, there is really no need to require developers to build more. We just need to encourage occupancy. The reason why there are no occupants is because people go back to the urban centers because it's where their works are. So we need to introduce livelihood in these areas, handicraft, training centers, and so many things that they can do at home. Rather than just suspending or deferring it for 2 years, which is clamored by the various organizations, we should go further and amend this Section 18, as mentioned by my friend Toti, and exclude the developments of economic and low-cost housing from the coverage of compliance. In other words, if you're a developer doing economic housing until 1.7 million or low-cost housing until 3 million, you should not be required to still develop socialized housing because these are low-cost, these are affordable anyway. And right now, what developers do is that they comply by what we call investments. 20% or 25% of the socialized housing counterpart, they pay that to the government by escrow or whatever. These are money, capital, which are supposed to be used to develop more housing rather than put them in escrow to the government. So these are the things that we should consider, especially in this pandemic, which is where developers right now are required to comply first with socialized housing before they can get certificate of registrations and license to sell. And I agree that there should be a provisional license to sell to be issued to the developers, whether with an undertaking to comply with this or may not be when this is suspended or deferred. On number 3 is about the pricing, the classification as explained by our friend from the DBP a while ago. He explained what is covered by socialized, economic, and low cost because these are target classification for government incentives. The reason why developers do not really develop socialized housing project is because the price is so it's not very feasible. For example, right now, a socialized housing for a condominium of 24 square is just saleable up to 750,000. 750,000 for a 24 square. We know that that is not feasible now. It is not even the cost of the unit, more so if you include the land. We need to rationalize, and mentioned also by Toti, the requirements and eliminate those that are not really necessary. For those that are necessary, we divide them into those that are required upfront so that developers can already get their license to sell, certificate of registration, even if these are temporary or provisional, and then comply with the others over 1 year or 2 years by affidavit of undertaking, so that we can already do all of these housing projects, which again is recognized by everyone as the engine of growth for our economy. As mentioned by the Secretary, a housing project, the housing industry, when it moves, it affects 80 other industries. In fact, right now, we all know that there are at least 4 million, almost 10% of the labor workforce of the Philippines are in construction, even without counting those in the upstream and downstream industries. And in 2019, construction alone contributed 16.5% of our GDP. So it's really an engine for our economic recovery.
We in the Development Bank of the Philippines could not pass up on this opportunity to share the important insights about possibilities that can be explored amid the challenges of this pandemic. Virtual events like these are truly a welcome initiative. They let us see the voice, so that to speak, that should help anchor our key sectors in a position to prevail just when everything seems to be grinding to a halt. And housing or shelter provision is one such priority sector that deserves our attention. With the pandemic forcing many Filipinos to work or stay in their family homes, especially with the national government's Balik Probinsya program, we can expect a scenario of increased demand for modestly priced housing units, especially in urban centers where those in the provinces may tend to converge. Of course, there is the challenge of market or economic disruption on one hand, but the other half of the picture also reveals an opportunity. There are those who might be thinking of finding their own place instead of staying with their families and relatives, considering the requirement of physical distancing. These potential property buyers or end users may realize that the time is now to take advantage of the prospects of more responsive and favorable pricing for housing projects. Next slide, please. Our development interventions for the social services sector encompass our continuing efforts to help provide access to shelter. And with our own program objectives predicated on advancing inclusivity goals, our main focus is on helping respond to the housing needs of lower middle and socialized income sectors. Next. DBP's support to the housing sector is carried out through two major programs: the Residential Real Estate Financing Program, or what we call as RRFP, and Contract to Sell Financing Facility, State Developers, or the CTS program. RREFP aims to effectively address the shelter and tenure security needs of employees in the public and private sector, or FW families, new households, and homeless Filipinos. At the same time, a key objective is to consciously promote sustainable alternative construction technologies, environmental consciousness, housing microfinance, and a holistic approach to community development. Next, please. Contracts to sell are evidences of indebtedness of end buyers of fully developed subdivisions or condominium units. The DBP accepts CTS as an alternative credit instrument vis-a-vis the traditional mortgage loan as basis of providing end-user financing to property developers. The CTS program involves three parties, namely DBP, the real estate developer, and the home buyer. Through the program, DBP purchases the receivables of a developer covered by CTS in pursuit of its trust to further expand its contribution to development and responsiveness of the housing sector. So DBP remains in step with efforts to strengthen the Filipinos as they face up to current challenges. Our programs of assistance will continue to consider their need and right to have access to opportunities to ensure their well-being, which includes their housing and tenure security requirements. We are confronted by problem brought about by the pandemic. Somebody said that problem is just another word opportunity. And coming together in this virtual business forum to try and navigate the opportunities beyond the challenges for our country's housing sector, I say we have taken a brave leap forward towards discovering possibilities for our country and of our people. So thank you, and once again, good morning.
To share his reaction as well, we have the chairman and CEO of Januarios Holdings Incorporated. I'd like to introduce Mr. Januario Jesus Atencio.
The figures seem to be right. Okay, so last time I checked, it was 5 million housing backlog. So today, it's apparently now up to 7. So the question is, why is it growing? Okay, one of the statistics that's not really mentioned is the housing supply. And last time I checked, if you have a backlog of 7 million and the housing supply is not even 250,000 units per year, you know you have a problem. So it's not a question of limiting or managing demand. It is a question of how do we build more houses every year? And even a 100% increase in the current supply from 250 to 500 isn't going to help. So what you need is a change of environment, a change of mindset that can immediately ramp up to maybe 1 million houses a year. It doesn't even matter for me if it's socialized, housing for the poor, economic, affordable, high-end. There's such a demand for housing in all components and in all the regions that it doesn't really matter what kind of house you build for the market and where it's built, because the demand is just great. And so the problem what we have is a supply problem. Thing is this, in a way, Totti was right when he said that, it's not as if we haven't thought about this problem for the past 25 years. I mean, there's been many roadmaps done, there's been many policies, there's been many programs for the past 25 years. And so, nothing much has really happened, and we continue to see limited supply and increasing demand. I think it has to do with mindset. When I started being a developer 25 years ago, it only took 3 months to actually have all these permits done and put up housing projects. Today, Harry's right, there's like 80 different permits, from the local to the regional to the national. There's more than 120 signatures you have to get. One of them is absent from signing that document. Your housing project's delayed. I had a joke once, but the only person that you don't talk to when you want to build a housing project is the chief of police. But since we have a PNP housing program, you have to talk to him too. Then I said, okay, so the only person you don't need to talk to is the parish priest. But there's some social Kawad Kalinga project that you have to talk to the parish priest. So in effect, everybody's involved, making the barrier to entry to this business high. It's not easy now to enter the housing business compared to 25 years ago. And so if we're looking at to lower the number of permits from, say, 80 to something lower, I mean, let's not just be content with and congratulate ourselves if, okay, we've decreased the permits from 80 to 5. I don't think that's going to work. You know why socialized housing doesn't work, ladies and gentlemen? Because nobody wants to live there. That's the whole fact. That's why Harry's saying, you've got so much surplus of socialized housing supply. You know why? Because nobody wants to live in a socialized housing house. One of the things we have to realize in the housing industry is that a house is one of the most aspirational products that man has ever invented in this universe. You don't want to buy a house that you can simply afford. You want to buy a house that is just outside of your present financial capability. And that makes sense because one of the longest installment plans is a housing installment plan. So you're stuck with the house for quite a long time, 25 years. And the buyers realize that as they get older, their income grows, their opportunities increase, their control of money and wealth will also increase as they get older. But the monthly amortization becomes stable. And so after 10 years or, some time, you will see that the monthly amortization of this homeowner relative to his income becomes smaller. So that's the reason why nobody wants to buy a socialized housing house. You have to understand also, we also understand that socialized housing is part of the formal sector. This isn't housing for the poor, right? That's a different market and it's different universe altogether. That's NHA housing. That's housing for the poor. Socialized housing is housing for the formal sector, but in the lowest segment of people who earn. And when you earn, you know that you're going to get promoted, you're going to, be with more money as you get older. If you're lucky, you can marry well. You know what I mean? So what I'm saying is this, a 450 or 750 doesn't work.
I'd like to call on our next reactor. She is the CEO of the V Group of Companies, KD Marie.
The points that were raised are actually what we need right now, especially with the current pandemic and scenario that the Filipinos are actually experiencing. So just a few points. I love what Januario and my friend Toti as well and Harry told us about the need for license to sell, provisional license to sell, and all the other things. But before I start my presentation, I would like to tell you about the current issues or the current scenario that the Filipinos are experiencing. So me as a developer on the V Group of Companies, that's our mother company, 3 things that we are experiencing right now, which is also relating to the users. So I'm more on the consumer side here. So first of all, as a developer, we do have a demand for the medium cost housing. And we do have a demand because of the Balik Probinsya program. With the Balik Probinsya program, definitely it's a great opportunity being given by the government. But this is the issue that I can say as a millennial as well. The issue is you provide township communities. We do that as well. When we provide township communities, after a month or 2, this is something that you can actually think of in your heads. After a month or 2, those millennials or those SMEs, which is the power of our economy, would go back to Metro Manila and they would get smaller houses. That's why, according to Santos Knight Frank and Colliers, there's a need for micro units. Why? Because of the infrastructure. So the infrastructure in the provinces are still not adaptable to what we're currently having right now with sustaining our operations during work from home. So that's one of the things that we have to actually address. So I'll go to my presentation now. Why should we convert into green architecture? Well, everybody knows that if you're into traditional and conventional, you would be focusing or you would be putting your cost higher. because traditional means of doing construction will entail more cost in the long run. Like what January said earlier as well. I'm going to quote you, but he said that why don't we use technologically advanced materials in order for us to lower down our cost and lower our carbon footprint as well. So that's one of the things we have to consider. It actually translates to potential savings, energy savings, cost savings for a tenant's perspective, and like what I said, the lower cost of construction. With the tenant's perspective, if the tenant would be living in a green, sustainable community, then for them, it's the cost for power is lower, the cost for water consumption is lower as well, because there are other facilities wherein we can do rainwater harvesting and gray water harvesting. It yields high property values. Now, those buildings here under Verde, so I'm also a Verde professional, by the way. So Verde and LEED certified, they actually produce more energy saving utilities for lessees. So we can also translate that into residential. And it's good because in this current scenario, everybody is saving. Aside from the benefit of promoting health and well-being to the inhabitants, it also gives back to nature. And how does green architecture convert into a sustainable business? So with the energy savings and the incentives that hopefully all the cities and municipalities can give, because I know currently right now only Quezon City has the tax incentive for a green building. You know that they allow up 15% up to 25% tax incentives if your building is actually sustainable. So if one city can do that, why can't other cities? I'm inviting all the mayors out there to actually come up with a tax incentive for a sustainable development. So at least it can translate, especially DBP, Paul is actually here and he's into sustainability as well. So maybe you can extend that or even have a study, since there's a lot of organizations such as Philippine Green Building Council, Philippine Green Building Initiative, who can actually rate the projects into a sustainable one. If you have that, it will lower the cost on all aspects, and people are working from home. Because people are working from home, they are going to look into more sustainable opportunities that would increase their operational expenses and fixed costs. So I'm talking about, aside from what we discussed earlier, I'm talking about what we can do as a sustainable business and how we can translate our current developments into a sustainable one. Later, I'll discuss that more. It has potential to generate more jobs, by the way, because definitely in order for you to fix your infrastructure and make it more sustainable, move the infrastructure as well for data or internet use to the provinces because of our Balik Probinsya program. So maybe we can allocate and work with private developers as well in terms of that. So you will actually increase and expand the way you are doing things that can be fixed because of the current pandemic. Nandito na eh. We already have the current scenario wherein we're experiencing this kind of issues and situations. So why not do it simultaneously? You have the Balik Probinsya program, you have the CTS financing, you're helping the developers. So why don't we expand that reach and make sure that the users, because it's all about the reason why we're doing real estate development is for the users, for the people. For developers, it's profit as well. But for the government, for other people, it's about having a livable community. The government can help by, like what I said, the incentives, easier process, please, on the procedures, provisional license to sell, like what Toti mentioned and Harry, extension of VAT exempt. This is very important for us. Toti, I was discussing with some of my team before. It's only until January 2021 that the VAT exempt is implemented. So why don't we extend that? Because basically we lost the whole year for leveraging on that VAT exempt. So it also helps our users because 12% VAT for a 3.2 million and above would hurt the economy more. And Filipinos can actually buy up to 4.5 million with a medium cost housing, because that's what we're actually doing right now. And we can still see the demand. So why don't we make it even higher if possible? But an extension of 2 years or more would probably do. And the lower financing rates for housing and for the users. So I'll be telling about what our company is addressing right now. The 6.5 million housing gap in the Philippines, the provision of housing opportunities for township developments. We are incorporating technology, digitalization, and we are collaborating with industry partners. So we're not fast moving when it comes to bigger developments. What we are focusing on right now is a pocket development. Pocket developments, which is roughly about 6-story buildings. The 6-story buildings would actually have a faster turnaround, so the users can actually use the units that they bought right away. It would promote more expansion in other areas, since like what I discussed earlier with the Balik Provincia program, they still go back to Metro Manila because of the internet and data usage. They always go back because mabagal daw yung internet in the provinces. So with the micropods and micro units that we are doing and collaborating with SMEs who are doing work from home, as well as BPO industry, because BPO industry, I was talking to some of my friends. They said that they are closing down some of their facilities and they are getting buildings wherein it has a fast data speed. So there would be, if in order for you to push the demand of housing, then push the needs of the people who would be using that housing. With digitalization and technology, with the apps that we are using, we can support the economy of the Philippines and still incorporate the cash flow. Kahit pa konti-konti lang. This is only 12 square meters area. The livable space of a user is 6 square meters. Imagine, it's so small. So with 12 square meters, only around 2 people can actually use it. But with those solutions that we are offering, we can actually support more developments and we can support what the economy needs, because they are not occupying offices right now. They're not occupying, making use of more cost, but they are lessening it, but digitalizing into a more sustainable business. So that's our current direction right now. So I'll be ending my presentation there. And if you have questions later, I'll be glad to answer it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Architect KD. That is a good insight on the strategy and the direction of the V Group of companies. I appreciate inclusion of technology and adoption of it, really, because it addresses that market that we have that's also looking for sustainable and affordable homes. So thank you very much for that. And I'll be moving on to our very last reactor before we proceed to the question and answer portion. I'd like to welcome the Vice President of the Organization of Socialized and Economic Housing Developers of the Philippines, Mr. Paulo Giovanni Olivares.
So again, we are OSHDAP. It's an organization of socialized housing developers of the Philippines. Our envision is growth through digital and dignified housing for the Filipino people. Presently, we are the leading private sector organization with over 200 members in 10 local regional groups. So our members are primarily developers. We're actually mostly composed of small and medium enterprises. Our developers are located within Visayas and Mindanao. And currently, with the situation of the pandemic, we're really having cash flow issues because we're SMEs, and our programs that we'll be sharing will be highlighted to the new human settlements urban development agenda. Next slide, please. So first, the strengthening of private sector participation policy making under the new Department of Human Settlements and Urban Development. Number two, improving the ease of doing business together with the number three is expanding housing finance and sustainable incentives programs for home buyers. Number four, upholding fair access to land through a genuine land use policy. Number five, redefining affordable housing. Number six is promoting green building resilient settlements and innovative housing technology and solutions. So based on our data, yes, we've been highlighting the 6.5 million backlog of our housing gaps that will happen up to 2022. It's primarily also, you can note the median age of the Filipinos is at 24. So a lot of them are first-time home buyers. Next slide, please. So as you can see, our data from HUDC from 2009 to 2019, as you can see, across all types of housing dropped from 25% from 2017 to 2018, then picked up in 2019 with an increase of 50%. It also shows a year on fluctuation on housing production. Notably, there is a consistent decrease on socialized housing production. It dropped 50% from 2017 to 2018 and dropped another 18% in 2019. With this pandemic, we're even expecting an unprecedented dip in housing production. Next slide, please. So here are our proposed recovery measures for mass housing is an important recovery incentive strategy which must form part of any economic stimulus plan. Next slide. Providing stimulus funds to support the mass housing sector through Pag-ibig and government and private banks and other financial institutions. This was what was Toti was saying, the lowering of interest rates to 3% per annum for institutional loans to mass housing developers with differential interest subsidy from stimulus funds and incentivizing programs and projects that will encourage urban dwellers to return to their provinces and other urbanizing areas to reduce population density in highly urbanized centers. The comprehensive regulatory proposal for recovery. Currently, easing of the process of issuance of license, certificate of registration, and license to sell through the regulatory rollback and shifting to post-validation. Also, the deferment of compliance of socialized housing requirement. And the third, together with the NHSB, DILG, ARTA, and NEDA, ensuring ease of doing business. In closing, we would like to highlight mass housing as an important recovery strategy. We in OSHDAP believe that providing fiscal stimulus and incentives to our industry is consistent with the government's aim of allotting resources for programs that provide sustained economic growth. It will definitely contribute to the country's transition out of the economy adversely affected by COVID-19. We thank the good secretary for continuing to hear us out. We hope our proposals are considered and favorable regulatory environment is provided so that we can all survive and recover from this pandemic.
All right. This wraps up our session this morning, everyone. Again, this is Kay Calpalugtu. I've been your host and moderator for this event. Thank you to Manila Times as well, to Mr. Dante Ang II and the team. And then we will see you next time at the next online forum.